Chapter 1942. She has been cultivating here for less than a month. During the day, she has been cultivating in the Wind Canyon. Only at night would she be able to improve her cultivation. But until now, I have not improved at all. Bailey Hongzhuang has already improved by 2 levels. What kind of abnormal cultivation speed is this? No wonder Bailey Hongzhuang was able to become one of our core disciples. Just this potential alone is not something that ordinary people can compare to. The core disciples were helpless. Originally, they were able to become core disciples of Limitless Palace because they thought that they were geniuses. But after meeting Bailey Hongzhuang, their self-confidence had taken a huge hit. What was a genius? After the survival of the fittest, only the geniuses who were compared were the real geniuses. Originally, they were in the core disciple team, and everyone was working hard to improve their cultivation. They did not feel that they were much weaker than the others. Until Bailey Hongzhuang appeared, they realized that this was a big problem. Compared to Bailey Hongzhuang, they were not geniuses at all. At most, they were a group of mediocre people. After Pei Yifan got along with Bailey Hongzhuang, his admiration for Bailey Hongzhuang also deepened. Just Bailey Hongzhuang's hard work was enough to make people blush with shame. In fact, as a core disciple, every one of them was extremely hard-working. It was just that Bailey Hongzhuang's hard work and focus was stronger than them. In many disciples' opinion, the reason why Bailey Hongzhuang could have such a fast breakthrough speed was related to the elixirs that she had. After all, after everyone cultivated in the Wind Canyon, they relied on using their cultivation technique to recover their spirit energy. Only Bailey Hongzhuang used elixirs to recover as fast as possible. Therefore, Bailey Hongzhuang cultivated in the Wind Canyon for the shortest time. However, she spent the most time in the hurricane. Bailey Hongzhuang enjoyed this kind of cultivation process. Every day, she could feel her own improvement. Every day, the time she spent in the Wind Canyon became longer. She believed that as long as she continued to improve like this, it wouldn't be long before she would be able to pass the test of the Wind Canyon. Most importantly, she didn't care if she could last 4 hours in the Wind Canyon. She was more concerned about her control over her elemental energy. She believed that when she used the same martial skill in battle in the future, she would be able to save even more origin energy. This might not seem like a big deal, but in a real fight, especially when the difference in strength between the two was not too big, this point was extremely important. It was very likely that it could help one win or save one's life at a critical moment. Time passed slowly. On this day, Bailey Hongzhuang realized that she didn't have many pills left. When she was cultivating in the Wind Canyon, the consumption of this pill was extremely shocking. Even though she originally had quite a number of medicinal pills, under such consumption, she was still clumsy. Although Bewitching had brought a lot of elixirs with him, he didn't bring many elixirs that could restore elemental energy. This was because as long as it wasn't for training outside, the demand for these elixirs wouldn't be high. Why don't I go to Limitless Palace's pill refining hall to buy some herbs? Bailey Hongzhuang looked at Bewitching inquiringly. They were now in Limitless Palace and not Tiangang sect. Naturally, she couldn't ask for any elixirs. Chapter 1943. Even though Bailey Hongzhuang had already stayed in Limitless Palace for a period of time, she had always been shuttling back and forth between Wind Canyon and her bedroom. As for the other places in Limitless Palace, she did not know much about them. However, she believed that the structure of each sect would not be too different. Limitless Palace was such a big sect, there would definitely be a pill refining hall. Hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Bewitching thought for a moment and then nodded his head. That's fine too, but I'm afraid it will waste your time. A trace of worry emerged between Bewitching's brows. If it was any other place, he could use money to buy pills. However, in Limitless Palace, it was obviously not feasible. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled. It's all right, it won't waste my time. Since my cultivation has increased, my mental strength should have increased as well. Recently, she had been busy increasing her cultivation and had slacked off a lot on her pill refining skills. Now that she had this opportunity, she felt that it was extremely good. After all, she had been cultivating intensely all day long. If she could relax a little, she might be able to achieve better results. Bewitching looked at Bailey Hongzhuang's glowing appearance, and his gaze became even gentler. In fact, from the beginning until now, he only knew that Hongzhuang was good at pill refining skills. However, he had never seen Hongzhuang refine pills with his own eyes. Thinking about it, when Hongzhuang was concentrating on pill refining, she also had her own charm. Since you've already made your decision, then it's decided. Bewitching's lips curled into an elegant and charming smile. He also felt that Hongzhuang could relax a little under such high-intensity cultivation. Changing the method of cultivation was also a good choice. Thinking back, when his master had led him to cultivate, he had also used the same method. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded her head slightly. Then I won't go to Wine Canyon to cultivate today. I'll go to Pill Refining Hall to buy some herbs. I'll go with you, Bewitching said immediately. Bailey Hongzhuang raised her eyes slightly and looked at Bewitching with a sweet smile. The corners of her lips gradually rose. Sure. Over the past few days, she had been training in Wind Canyon with the three beasts during the day. Only Bewitching stayed in the palace. Since she wasn't going to cultivate in the Wind Canyon today, she was naturally willing to go with Bewitching. After making the decision, Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching immediately set off. They did not know where Limitless Palace's Alchemy Hall was located. However, they believed that as long as they asked around, they would know the answer. When the three beasts saw that Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching were about to set off for Pill Refining Hall, they, who loved a lively atmosphere, naturally would not miss out on it. Xiao He and Xiao Bai immediately leaped onto Bailey Hongzhuang's shoulders, while Bailey Hongzhuang followed behind her. Seeing how self-aware the three beasts were, Bailey Hongzhuang already knew what they were planning to do. Immediately after, the two of them and the three beasts walked towards the direction of Pill Refining Hall. There weren't any cultivators around the palace. Hence, Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching could only walk all the way out before they saw anyone else. When Bewitching saw two figures approaching from the front, he and Bailey Hongzhuang looked at each other and walked towards them. Ladies, may I know where Pill Refining Hall is? The two ladies who were walking were suddenly stopped by someone and could not help but frown. Chapter 1944. They never thought that there would be such a handsome man in the Limitless Palace. Their initial displeasure from the sudden interruption instantly dissipated into nothingness. A man like this was simply their dream. When Bewitching saw that the two women were only staring at him in a daze without any reaction, his handsome brows furrowed slightly. Ladies, may I ask where the Alchemy Hall is? Bewitching spoke again and repeated his previous question. When they heard Bewitching's voice again, the two women finally regained their senses. Their faces were quickly dyed red, as they felt embarrassed by their previous actions. Not far away, Bailey Hongzhuang looked at the two women's reactions, and her expression was tinged with interest. Bewitching's charm was truly unmatched. As long as the women saw Bewitching, most of them would have this expression on their faces. Back then in Fengbo country, although Bewitching's legs were crippled, there were still many women who adored him. Just this point alone was enough to see how great Bewitching's charm was. She and Bewitching had been together for such a long time. Every time she saw Bewitching, she still could not escape from his charm. That impeccable face, those affectionate and enchanting eyes were enough to intoxicate any woman. Perhaps, after spending so much time together, she could feel Bewitching's unique charm even more. Every time she saw him, she would be intoxicated. Master, Bewitching's charm is not ordinary. We've only asked for directions, and these two women are already infatuated with him. Xiao He shook her head and clicked her tongue. Evildoer. He's really an evildoer. Master, you have to be more careful in the future. There are many beautiful women in the sect, and there are also many moths who cause trouble. Xiao Bai frowned. Looking at the two women's infatuated expressions, it felt a wave of displeasure. Bewitching is Master's. What are these two girls doing? Master is so charming. Only a man like Bewitching is worthy of Master. I don't think Master needs to worry about this at all. After all, Master isn't someone these mediocre people can compare to. White Lion raised its head proudly. In its mind, only its master was the most charming woman. Ordinary women could not compare to its master. Upon hearing White Lion's words, Xiao He and Xiao Bai looked at each other. They felt that White Lion was right. Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but rub Baisher's head and smile when she saw how the three beasts were fighting for her. Don't worry. With the relationship between Beichen and I, we don't need to care about this at all. The three beasties couldn't help but glance at Bailey Hongzhuang. As expected, Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes didn't show the slightest bit of displeasure or worry. Under the circumstances where their hearts were connected, nothing else would have any effect. The Alchemy Palace is in the direction of the Alchemy Palace. As long as you follow this path, you can only turn right when you reach a fork in the road. When you reach a large hall, you'll reach the Alchemy Palace. The two women blushed, and their hearts thumped as they pointed the way for Di Beichen. Their hearts were filled with excitement. Thank you. Di Beichen joined his fists together and turned to leave. Chapter 1945. The two of them looked at Di Beichen's back, wondering if they had the chance to get to know Di Beichen better. However, the two of them saw Di Beichen walk to the side of a woman, and their originally beating hearts could not help but dim a little. However, the two of them refused to give up. Perhaps the two of them were just friends, or perhaps they were brother and sister. If that was the case, perhaps they still had a chance. Di Beichen quickly walked to Bailey Hongzhuang's side with a mesmerizing smile on his handsome face. Wife, I already know how to get to the Pill Refinery Hall. Following Di Beichen's words, the two women, who were filled with anticipation, completely lost all hope. Wife, that woman was actually his wife. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled and said, let's go then. Then the two of them and the three beasts walked towards the Pill Refinery Hall. The two women stared blankly at Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen. They felt extremely helpless when they saw the tacit understanding between the two of them. However, when the two of them saw Bailey Hongzhuang's face, the glimmer of hope in their hearts was completely extinguished. This was because they could not be compared to her at all. The difference between them was simply an uncrossable chasm. They could not compare to her at all. This man already has a wife at such a young age. That's unbelievable. Didn't they say that cultivators get married at a later age? Why is this man so early? The two women sighed faintly. Their hearts were filled with helplessness and lamentation. Unfortunately, they no longer had a chance. After Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen had walked some distance away, she could not help but laugh. Beichen, you're really charming. Bailey Hongzhuang turned to look at Di Beichen. Those two women were looking at me with jealousy in their eyes. Looking at Bailey Hongzhuang's playful look, Di Beichen grabbed Bailey Hongzhuang's soft hand with his right hand. Then my wife, you'll have to watch me closely. Bailey Hongzhuang glanced at Di Beichen. Do you still need me to watch you closely? No need. Your husband will always belong to my wife alone. How about that? Di Beichen's gaze was fixed on Bailey Hongzhuang. His eyes were filled with curiosity and ridicule. Hearing Di Beichen's straightforward words, Bailey Hongzhuang's face turned slightly red. She turned her head to the other side, pretending that nothing had happened. However, the corners of her lips could not help but curl upwards. Di Beichen saw Bailey Hongzhuang looking to the other side. He did not intend to let Hongzhuang off so easily. In the next moment, his figure flashed and appeared on the other side of Bailey Hongzhuang. With a glance, Di Beichen saw the happy curve of Bailey Hongzhuang's lips, and the smile in his eyes couldn't help but deepen. My wife, you're not being honest. Bailey Hongzhuang was a little embarrassed to be exposed by Di Beichen. However, now that Di Beichen had the evidence, she could not deny it. Looking at the affectionate Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen, the three beasts looked at each other and smiled. Even though they were not the parties involved, they could still feel the joy of the two. Laughing and joking along the way, Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen finally arrived at the Pill Refinery Hall. Limitless Palace's Pill Refinery Hall was comparable to Tiangang Sec's. However, compared to Tiangang Sec's solemn and strict decorations, Limitless Palace's Pill Refinery Hall was brighter and more gorgeous. Chapter 1946. Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen stopped in front of the Alchemy Palace Hall for a moment, and immediately walked in. Bailey Hongzhuang had already brought her own alchemy cauldron, so she planned to buy some medicinal ingredients in the Alchemy Palace Hall and returned to cultivate. When Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen walked into the Alchemy Palace Hall, many cultivators' gazes landed on the two of them. One had to admit that the two of them had outstanding appearances that were too eye-catching. Hence, no matter where they were, they would be the center of attention. Bailey Hongzhuang sized up the Alchemy Palace Hall in front of her. She didn't know much about the Alchemy Palace Hall, so when she saw it for the first time, she couldn't help but take a few more glances. In her line of sight, the left side of the Cultivation Palace Hall was the place to buy medicinal pills, while the right side of the Alchemy Palace Hall was the place to buy medicinal ingredients. The Alchemy Palace Hall didn't only have one floor, but there were even higher floors. According to Di Beichen, all the alchemists in the sect would choose to refine pills in the Alchemy Palace Hall. This was because there were other senior and junior brothers to interact with here, and there were also instructors. This was very effective in improving their alchemy skills. Hence, if Bailey Hongzhuang guessed correctly, this higher floor should be the place where the other alchemists refined pills. Although she couldn't go to the other floors to take a look, Bailey Hongzhuang felt that refining pills in the Alchemy Palace Hall should be a very good feeling. Bailey Hongzhuang's gaze was fixed on the medicinal ingredients area, on the right side of the Alchemy Palace Hall. She didn't need to buy any medicinal pills, because directly buying medicinal pills would require her to pay more. Correspondingly, buying medicinal ingredients would be much easier. However, Bailey Hongzhuang didn't know how to buy medicinal ingredients, and she didn't know if she could buy them with money. On this point, Di Beichen didn't say much. Every sect had different settings, so she couldn't determine what Limitless Palace's settings were. However, in Tiangang sect, one could buy medicinal ingredients with money. It was just that there weren't many cultivators who did so. This was because other than the disciples in the Alchemy Palace Hall, who needed to buy medicinal ingredients, the disciples in the Cultivation Palace Hall didn't need to. After all, they didn't know how to refine pills. Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen slowly walked to the medicinal ingredients area, and the three beasts followed closely behind them. When the cultivators in the palace hall saw Bailey Hongzhuang, and walked over, their gazes couldn't help but fell. Of course, they didn't know what these two people wanted to do. What were they trying to do? Although everyone didn't know the identity of Bailey Hongzhuang at first, after seeing the three contract beasts behind Bailey Hongzhuang, they had a certain guess in their hearts. After all, the Bian sect's palace Bianz's and S. and Huangzi's Lord S. palace pill? Therefore, when the cultivators saw these three beasts, they could almost determine Bailey Hongzhuang's identity. Once Bailey Hongzhuang's identity was confirmed, everyone could guess Di Beichen's identity. The young sect master of Tiangang sect had always been famous, but there weren't many cultivators who had seen him in person. Because ordinary people didn't have the qualifications to come into contact with Di Beichen, many people couldn't recognize Di Beichen, even if they saw him on a normal day. Chapter 1947. Miss Bailey, what do you want to buy? The disciple from the medicinal herbs area inquired. Seeing that the other party had directly called out her name, Bailey Hongzhuang smiled and said, I want to buy these medicinal herbs. Bailey Hongzhuang handed over the list in her hands to the other party. Before coming to the pill refining hall, she had already written down the medicinal herbs she needed to buy. To the current her, she didn't need any other medicinal herbs. The only thing she needed was the medicinal herbs for the qi returning pill. After the disciple received the list from Bailey Hongzhuang, he looked at it carefully. After seeing the medicinal herbs on the list, the disciple could tell at a glance that these were the medicinal herbs needed to refine the qi returning pill. Suddenly, the disciple couldn't help but look at Bailey Hongzhuang with a bit of doubt. Miss Bailey, these are the medicinal herbs for the qi returning pill. If you need the qi returning pill, why don't you go directly to the medicinal herbs area to buy it? Hearing that, Bailey Hongzhuang shook her head slightly. I only want to buy these medicinal herbs. I wonder if I can buy them with gold coins? Every sect had their own point system, and many things between disciples were converted using points. Although she had been cultivating in Wuxia Palace during this period of time, it was all in Wind Canyon. Points and the like had nothing to do with her. You can. The disciple smiled lightly. It's just that the price of using gold coins will be slightly higher than outside. No problem. Bailey Hongzhuang heaved a sigh of relief. As long as she could buy the medicinal herbs, there was no harm in spending more gold coins. In actual fact, she had stayed in the assessment competition for 2 years. The amount of gold coins she had was really not small. It was just that in the assessment competition, gold coins had no use at all. So she had always kept them. Now that she could use them to buy medicinal herbs, it was extremely good. Miss Bailey, how many sets of medicinal herbs do you need? The disciple inquired. Bailey Hongzhuang thought for a moment. Now that she had a huge demand for the qi-returning pill, since she was here, she might as well buy some more. Give me a few hundred servings, Bailey Hongzhuang said. With Bailey Hongzhuang's words, the cultivator's face could not help but change. He stared at Bailey Hongzhuang in a daze, wondering if he had heard wrong. Lady Bailey, tell me, how many portions do you want? 300 will do, Bailey Hongzhuang said. The level of the qi-returning pill was not high, and with her current strength, the speed of refining the qi-returning pill was also very fast. Although it would take a certain amount of time to refine 300 sets of pills, at the very least, it would not be a problem to refine enough qi-returning pills for daily cultivation. Hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's repeated words, the disciple heard it clearly, and the shock in his heart grew stronger. Bailey Hongzhuang was just a cultivator, but she actually wanted to buy 300 sets of medicinal herbs. This was a bit too much. However, looking at Bailey Hongzhuang's confident look, the disciple did not question further. Lady Bailey, although the amount of medicinal herbs we have prepared here is not little, but 300 sets, I am not sure if we have enough. Give me some time, I will count them. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly. Then I will have to trouble you. The disciple immediately started to count the medicinal herbs for Bailey Hongzhuang. It was rare to see such a large purchase of medicinal herbs. Even the alchemists in the pill refinery hall would only buy a few dozen sets of medicinal herbs together. 300 sets, this was really a little shocking. Chapter 1948. Bewitching stood not too far away, and sized up the entire pill refinery hall. Although Limitless Palace had only been established for a short period of time, its layout and arrangements were extremely good, and no one could find any fault with it. The more he looked, the more he would be able to learn. After all, if he wanted the sect to have a better development, he needed to learn with an open mind. Very quickly, the disciple finished counting and said, Miss Bailey, what a coincidence. We have 300 sets of medicinal ingredients here, and there is not a single set left. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang's lips curled up slightly, and a smile appeared in her eyes. Thank you. Bailey Hongzhuang handed over the gold coins needed for the 300 sets of medicinal ingredients to the disciple, and placed the 300 sets of medicinal ingredients into her Qiankuan bag. Just as the disciple said, using gold coins to buy medicinal ingredients was much more expensive than outside. However, as a sex cultivator, they were not poor people. Hence, the majority of the disciples could afford such a price. Just as Bailey Hongzhuang was about to leave after purchasing the medicinal ingredients, a cultivator walked to Bailey Hongzhuang's side and said to the disciple in the medicinal ingredients area, Give me 50 sets of medicinal ingredients to refine the energy recovery pill. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang and the disciple's eyes were filled with surprise. They did not expect that the other party was also here to purchase the energy recovery pill. Bailey Hongzhuang did not stay for long. She turned around and walked towards Bewitching. She needed to hurry back to refine the pills. After all, the more time she saved, the more she could improve. Bewitching, let's go. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled lightly. Bewitching saw that Bailey Hongzhuang had already bought the medicinal ingredients, and smiled as he nodded. All right. After Bailey Hongzhuang turned around and left, the disciple in charge of the medicinal ingredients area said, Senior Yao, I'm sorry. All the medicinal ingredients for the energy recovery pill today have been bought by that lady. As a cultivator of the pill refinery hall, Yao Yeren naturally knew this disciple. Hence, he directly called him Senior Yao. Although Bailey Hongzhuang was currently cultivating in Limitless Palace, everyone knew that she was a cultivator of Tiangang sect. Hence, they only addressed her as Miss Bailey. Hearing this, Yao Yeren could not help but frown. I remember that the amount of medicinal ingredients in the medicinal ingredients area every day is quite a lot. How could it be sold out? There were quite a number of disciples in the alchemy hall. Hence, the amount of medicinal herbs consumed every day was extremely large. However, as one of the 10 great sects, they naturally would not be lacking. No matter what, it was not to be sold out. Mississippi. Of you, Miss Bailey. Bought. Senior apprentice brother Yao. Why don't you come back tomorrow to buy it? I'll prepare it for you. Energy B. But. It. Yao Yeren's position in the alchemy hall wasn't low, and he was also very famous, but his temper was also not good. Hence, if he could, he was not willing to offend Yao Yeren. He did not expect that everyone would come to buy the energy recovery pills medicinal ingredients today. There were still leftovers when he sold them on normal days. Yao Yeren's eyes were filled with displeasure. Since I came here specifically to buy medicinal ingredients, I naturally have my own use. I don't care what you do. Go and gather 50 sets of medicinal ingredients for the energy recovery pill for me now. I have a use for it. Chapter 1949. Following Yao Yeren's words, the disciple's face couldn't help but reveal a difficult expression. Senior brother Yao, today's medicinal herbs have been sold out. We can only wait until tomorrow to collect more. There really isn't any left today. Limitless Palace also had certain regulations for collecting medicinal herbs. He sold medicinal herbs here to earn a certain amount of points, but the quantity of medicinal herbs was not something he could control. Once these words came out, Yao Yeren's face couldn't help but darken. Since he had already promised the other party, then he absolutely couldn't break the promise. With his reputation, if he couldn't even handle such a small matter, wouldn't it be embarrassing if word got out? As for buying the chi returning pills himself, that was something he wouldn't even consider. Earning points wasn't an easy thing to begin with. He had to keep his points to exchange for a better pill furnace. Who is the person you said bought all the chi returning pills? Yao Yeren asked aloud. The other party really didn't know the rules. One person actually bought 300 sets of medicinal herbs. What would the other alchemists do? Moreover, buying so many medicinal herbs for the chi returning pills was too exaggerated. It's that Miss Bailey, the disciple said. Got it. Yao Yeren narrowed his eyes. The other party didn't know the rules, so he had to let the other party understand. Looking at Yao Yeren's expression, the disciple knew that the situation wasn't good and couldn't help but say, Senior brother Yao Shi. However, Yao Yeren waved his hand, and a look of impatience appeared on his face. He completely ignored the disciple's words. In this pill refining hall, his position was quite high. Even alchemists with good pill refining skills had to give him some face. What more an alchemist who was still practicing with the chi returning pills? The disciple looked at Yao Yeren's departing figure and felt helpless. He originally intended to remind Yao Yeren of Bailey Hongzhuang's identity. Although the current Bailey Hongzhuang wasn't a cultivator of Limitless Palace, she was still someone who couldn't be offended. However, the situation now was already out of his control. The cultivators in the alchemy hall didn't know what Yao Yeren and the disciples in the medicinal herbs area were talking about. They only saw Yao Yeren walking out aggressively with curiosity in their eyes. After Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen left the alchemy hall, they walked towards the direction of the palace. As for the other places in the Limitless Palace, they didn't have any plans to explore it. However, at this moment, a voice suddenly rang out behind them. Hey, wait a minute. Yao Yeren did not remember what the medicinal ingredients area disciple had said. Therefore, he did not know the name of the woman in front of him. In fact, he was too lazy to remember. Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen couldn't help but frown when they heard the word hey. Could it be that he was calling them? Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen tacitly ignored the voice and continued to walk forward. When Yao Yeren saw that Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen were ignoring him, his face turned ugly. I'm talking to you, didn't you hear me? Yao Yeren strode forward and caught up with Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen. He stood in front of them. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at Yao Yeren in front of her, and her eyes were filled with doubt. In her impression, she had never seen the man in front of her before. Naturally, she couldn't say that she had offended him. Chapter 1950. What do you want? Bewitching's extraordinarily handsome face was filled with a cold and indifferent light, as a steady domineering aura quietly filled the air. This guy actually dared to be so disrespectful to them. When Yao Yeren saw Bewitching and Bailey Hongzhuang, he couldn't help but stare blankly for a moment. He had never seen these two people before. Moreover, from the temperament of these two people, he could tell that they were much stronger than ordinary cultivators. Hearing Bewitching's words, Yao Yeren only felt an inexplicable pressure. It actually gave him a sense of oppression. When he thought of this, Yao Yeren felt that it was a little ridiculous. Even if the two people in front of him had outstanding looks, they shouldn't make him feel pressured. One must know that his position in Limitless Palace wasn't bad, especially in the alchemy hall. His alchemy skills were much stronger than many disciples. Among the alchemy hall disciples that the elders valued the most, he was one of them. I heard that you just bought all the medicinal ingredients for the qi returning pill? Yao Yeren frowned. Compared to his previous overbearing manner, his imposing manner had inexplicably weakened a little. Even he himself didn't notice it. With Yao Yeren's voice falling, Bailey Hongzhuang's face showed a look of understanding. It turned out that the other party had come looking for her, because of the medicinal ingredients she had purchased. From the other party's expression, she was afraid that the other party also needed the medicinal ingredients for the qi returning pill, so they came looking for her. If the other party's attitude was a little more polite, she naturally wouldn't mind giving a portion of the medicinal ingredients to the other party. However, the other party was so rude that she really didn't have the slightest interest in giving them away. After all, the other party wanted to take the medicinal ingredients from her, because they needed her help. But with such an overbearing attitude, it was as if they were ordering her around. If it was anyone else, they wouldn't like it. That's right, it's me, Bailey Hongzhuang replied. Seeing that the medicinal ingredients were bought by Bailey Hongzhuang, Yao Yeren's expression changed a little. You bought so many medicinal ingredients by yourself. Have you thought about the feelings of the other alchemists? Yao Yeren's face was still full of displeasure. He had never seen the two disciples in front of him before, and only felt that the other party should not be disciples of the alchemy hall. Plus, if it was a disciple of the alchemy palace, they should be showing him respect. However, the two of them didn't show any signs of respect. Bailey Hongzhuang raised her eyebrows slightly. She didn't feel anything towards Yao Yeren's words. Anyone can buy medicinal herbs. Since there's a need, what's wrong with buying medicinal herbs? I have never heard that one person is not allowed to buy so many medicinal herbs. Bailey Hongzhuang's tone was a little colder. The other party's attitude was clearly to pick a fight. Looking at her superior attitude, it was obvious that she looked down on Bewitching. Looking at Bailey Hongzhuang's eloquent appearance, Yao Yeren's brows wrinkled even tighter. Do you know who I am? What does it have to do with us who you are? Bewitching said coldly. He was very unhappy with Yao Yeren in front of him. Someone actually dared to use such a nonsensical question to find trouble with them. Did they really think that they were easy to bully? Looking at Bewitching's indifferent appearance, Yao Yeren felt even more displeased. He had stayed in the alchemy palace for so long, and no one had ever dared to treat him with such an attitude. I am Yao Yeren, Yao Yeren emphasized. Chapter 1951. Not to mention Yao Yeren, Bewitching never cared about the names of the generally unknown elders in Limitless Palace. It was just a mere disciple. Bewitching simply didn't put him in his eyes. However, Bewitching's words in Yao Yeren's eyes were simply a deliberate provocation. He didn't believe that as long as it was a disciple of Limitless Palace, there was almost no one who hadn't heard of his name. His reputation had always been extremely resounding in the Alchemy Palace Hall. Even cultivators from other palaces had a certain demand for medicinal pills. Therefore, they would also know of his name. It was precisely because of this that Yao Yeren had always been proud of. After all, to be able to have such a status and reputation in such a huge limitless palace was not something an ordinary cultivator could do. However, this cultivator in front of him actually dared to provoke him like this. How could he not be angry? Never heard of it. Yao Yaran laughed instead of being angry. However, there was a trace of coldness in his eyes. In Limitless Palace, there's actually someone who says they haven't heard of my name? Yao Yaran looked straight at Bewitching, as if he wanted to see through all of Bewitching's thoughts. You think too highly of yourself. Bailey Hongzhuang's pitch-black phoenix eyes were filled with a touch of ridicule. Even when she was cultivating with the core disciples, she had never seen such a rampant disciple. She understood that alchemists had a high status in the sect. Therefore, alchemists had always been very arrogant. However, it was obvious that Yao Yaran's arrogance in front of them was useless. Bewitching looked at Bailey Hongzhuang beside him. He suddenly understood why Bailey Hongzhuang had always provoked countless cultivators over the years. It was because there were too many stupid people in this world. Usually, as the young sect master of Tiangang sect, any cultivator who saw him would be courteous to him. Even the young geniuses he met when he went out to cultivate naturally didn't dare to go overboard with him, after knowing his identity. However, after following Bailey Hongzhuang to the Limitless Palace today, he understood that there were some conflicts that appeared without any reason. Moreover, it was impossible for them to be amicable. I overestimated myself? Yao Yaran sneered. Ask the disciples here, who doesn't know my name? Rather than saying that I overestimated myself, it's better to say that you guys are ignorant. Yao Yaran glanced at the surrounding cultivators. Originally, the number of cultivators in the vicinity was not small. Now, after the conflict between him and Bailey Hongzhuang, the number of onlookers had increased. How did Yao Yaran get into a conflict with Bailey Hongzhuang? Isn't he just looking for trouble? Ever since the incident between Bailey Hongzhuang and Chuing Fei, many cultivators had already listed Bailey Hongzhuang as a person they absolutely could not offend. Fortunately, nothing like this had happened during this period of time. However, they did not expect that there would be a problem in front of the Alchemy Palace. Moreover, looking at the situation, the person who was looking for trouble seemed to be Yao Yaran, and not Bailey Hongzhuang. Who knows? I didn't notice what happened either. I only know that after Bailey Hongzhuang bought some medicinal herbs and left, Yao Yaran suddenly chased after her. Then it became like this. Chapter 1952. What does it have to do with us who you are? Bailey Hongzhuang was speechless for a while. Could it be that this guy came here to show off in front of them, looking for a sense of accomplishment? However, she had never heard of such a person before. Bewitching was obviously too lazy to deal with such a small character. He even felt that it was a waste of time to talk to him. He directly held Bailey Hongzhuang's small hand and walked forward. There was no need to waste his breath on such a person who had no sense of existence. Bailey Hongzhuang's thoughts were the same as Bewitching's. They were both people who valued time. It was not worth wasting time on such things. Seeing Bewitching and Bailey Hongzhuang walking past him and preparing to leave, Yao Yaran felt that Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching were afraid of him. The complacency in his eyes deepened. Now that there were more and more cultivators around, Bewitching and Bailey Hongzhuang could no longer pretend, so they wanted to leave quickly. One must know that the Alchemy Palace was his territory. What? You want to leave now? Yao Yaran naturally could not let Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching leave just like that. If he let them leave, then wouldn't he be the one who would lose face? Let me tell you, unless you leave the herbs behind now, don't even think about leaving. The more Yao Yaran spoke, the more complacent he became. At first, he had planned to buy some herbs, but now he had completely given up on this idea. He would just take it for free and save some points. Following Yao Yaran's words, Bailey Hongzhuang frowned. In the past, during the assessment competition, she had seen many rude and unreasonable cultivators. But ever since she came to the sect, such situations had decreased a lot. She never thought that such an unreasonable person would appear in front of her. I was the one who bought these herbs. Why should I give them to you? Originally, Bailey Hongzhuang was too lazy to waste time on a guy like Yao Yaran. But as Yao Yaran became more and more excessive, she was also angered. If a tiger did not show its might, Did he really think that she was a sick cat? Bewitching's eyes were filled with a gloomy light. This guy could actually be so cocky in Limitless Palace. This made his wife even more unhappy. If Mu was here and saw Bewitching's expression, he would know that someone was going to be in trouble. Usually, Bewitching was always an indifferent person, but once he made a move, he would be merciless. In the world. Originally, he didn't want to cause trouble in Limitless Palace, so he planned to ignore it. After hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words, the surrounding cultivators also understood the situation. It turned out that this was the case. Regarding Yao Yaren's usual arrogant personality, everyone had some understanding. But no one thought that Yao Yaren would dare to be so unreasonable in front of Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching. Wasn't he too arrogant? I told you to give it to me. You have to give it to me. Yao Yaren did not care whether he was reasonable or not. Since the other party made him unhappy, he would make the other party even more unhappy. Damn, is this guy an idiot? Xiao He had been holding back, but this guy in front of her was simply an idiot. Chapter 1953. Bite him to death. White Lion licked its lips. Recently, it had been quietly cultivating by its master's side. Now, a fellow who doesn't know what's good for him had suddenly appeared. It looks like it's about to make a comeback. These evildoers who have offended its master, let it bite them to death one by one. Xiao He and Xiao Bai glanced at White Lion and gave it a thumbs up. Although White Lion's words were a little bloody and violent, they were very much to their liking. When Yao Yaren saw the three beasts by Bailey Hongzhuang's side suddenly speak, a trace of surprise appeared in his eyes. However, when he heard the contents of the three demonic beasts' conversation, his expression turned ugly. These fellows dared to say such things about him. They've gone too far. I think you're all looking for death. As he spoke, Yao Yaren was about to kick White Lion. This fellow actually wants to bite him to death. It doesn't even know if it has the ability to do so. When Yao Yaren made this move, Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes narrowed. A wave of ruthlessness and murderous intent emerged in her heart. Someone actually dared to attack White Lion in front of her. They're simply looking for death. Just as Yao Yaren's foot was about to kick out, the primary energy in Bailey Hongzhuang's body quickly surged forth. She wanted to teach Yao Yaren a lesson. White Lion glared fiercely at Yao Yaren. It wanted to bite off Yao Yaren's neck. However, before Bailey Hongzhuang and White Lion could make a move, the crisp sound of bones breaking suddenly rang out. Crack! This crisp sound was not soft. Even in this noisy environment, Bailey Hongzhuang could hear it clearly. What followed was Yao Yaren's blood-curdling scream. Ah! Yao Yaren shrieked and his body fell to the ground. When the crowd heard Yao Yaren's blood-curdling scream, they could not help but look at him. Before their eyes, Yao Yaren had fallen to the ground and Bewitching's foot was stepping on Yao Yaren's knee. In this short moment, many cultivators could not see what had happened, but Yao Yaren's bones had already broken. Yao Yaren's face turned pale because of the pain. He stared blankly at Bewitching, unable to recover from the pain for a while. My leg! Yao Yaren could feel his leg bones shattering under Bewitching's foot. How dare you treat me like this? He simply couldn't believe that with his position in Limitless Palace, someone actually dared to be so ruthless to him. However, when Yao Yaren said this, Bewitching's eyes became increasingly indifferent. He then stepped on Yao Yaren's other leg. Crack! Another crisp sound rang out, and Yao Yaren once again screamed out. His deathly pale face was extremely ugly. Cold sweat continuously appeared on his forehead. His entire person was about to be killed. At this moment, Yao Yaren didn't dare to say anything more. He was afraid that if he said another word, the other party would directly take his life. The onlooking cultivators couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. Bewitching's move had no warning at all. Not only that, Bewitching's ruthlessness was simply shocking. As cultivators, injuries were inevitable. However, when Bewitching attacked, the crowd only felt that it was difficult to resist. Chapter 1954. After Bailey Hongzhuang and the three beasties saw Bewitching's clean and neat move, there was a touch of surprise in their eyes. They all felt that Yao Yaren deserved to be taught a lesson. However, Beichen's move was really stunning. Without using any elemental energy, Yao Yaren was completely dumbfounded with just a casual step. My goodness, Beichen's move is really mighty and domineering. Too cool. Xiaohei sighed. She rarely saw Beichen make a move, but every time Beichen made a move, it would give people a sense of amazement. It was really too awesome. Baisher's eyes were also filled with excitement. He felt that the way he usually appeared was already very cool, but Beichen's ruthlessness and decisiveness was even more amazing. After the onlooking cultivators saw Beichen's move, the amazement in their eyes deepened. However, many people present knew Beichen's true identity. Therefore, they did not find it difficult to accept. After all, once the sect's young sect master made a move, he would not show any mercy. Yao Yaren is really looking for trouble. What kind of person is Beichen? If you want to kill him, it's a simple matter. Yeah, Beichen's level is not something we can touch. Yao Yaren still wanted to bump into him. It's already good that he's not dead yet. This is really embarrassing. Yao Yaren is so unreasonable. He's simply making a joke out of himself in front of Beichen. For a moment, everyone looked at Yao Yaren with dissatisfaction. If both sides were cultivators from Limitless Palace, it wouldn't be a big deal to have a conflict. However, Bailey Hongzhuang and Beichen were both from Tiangang sect. Yao Yaren was so unreasonable. Wasn't this equivalent to making all the disciples of Limitless Palace lose face? Between two sects, any disciple's performance could represent the sect's face. Yao Yaren had brought shame to all of them. The disciple from the medicinal materials area also ran out. However, after seeing the situation in front of him, he shrunk his neck. He wanted to remind Yao Yaren before, but Yao Yaren ignored him. He couldn't do anything about it. Now that things had gotten to this point, he'd better pretend that he didn't know anything. After seeing that Yao Yaren had stopped, Beichen glanced at Yao Yaren indifferently. If Yao Yaren dared to say another word, he would break Yao Yaren's neck in the next moment. Noticing Beichen's cold gaze, Yao Yaren only felt a chill on his back. His throat seemed to be blocked, and he couldn't utter a single syllable. He felt a strong fear. Beichen in front of him was like a devil. Now he no longer doubted that as long as he said a few more words, Beichen would definitely take his life directly. In the next second, Beichen left with Bailey Hongzhuang. From the beginning to the end, he didn't want to waste his breath on Yao Yaren. After seeing Beichen's way of handling things, Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but marvel in her heart. This method was indeed domineering. He didn't give the other party any chance to explain or understand. This deterrent power was strong enough. Compared to killing Chewing Fei among the three beasts a few days ago, it was probably even more powerful. Chapter 1955. It wasn't until Beichen and Bailey Hongzhuang's figures disappeared from Yao Yaren's sight that Yao Yaren finally dared to speak. Which palace did those two fellows come from? Yao Yaren shouted. The pain in his leg was still unable to suppress the anger in his heart. He had stayed in Limitless Palace for so long, and had never suffered such humiliation. He only felt that he was about to explode from anger. Although the injury of his broken leg was very serious, as long as he could get medicinal pills and recuperate for a period of time, he would be able to recover to his original state. But now, he was being treated like this in front of the Alchemy Palace. How could he swallow this anger? When the crowd of Alchemy Palace's alchemists knew that Yao Yaren was being treated like this, they all rushed out. Looking at Yao Yaren's angry appearance, their expressions revealed some helplessness. Who were those two people just now? They actually dared to treat Yao Yaren like this? An alchemist's eyes revealed a look of surprise. With Yao Yaren's identity, logically speaking, no one should dare to treat him like this. But now, he was being humiliated by others. When the cultivators from the other palaces saw that many alchemists were confused, a touch of helplessness emerged in their hearts. These alchemists usually stayed in their rooms to cultivate. They simply didn't know anything about other matters. Bailey Hongzhuang and Beichen's identities were now well known in the other cultivation palaces. However, there were still many people in the Alchemy Palace who didn't know. Those two people just now weren't from our Limitless Palace. A cultivator spoke out. Hearing this, the anger in Yao Yaren's eyes intensified. How dare they treat me like this when they're not from our limitless palace? I think they're courting death. At this moment, Yao Yaren finally understood what Bewitching said. It turned out that Bewitching really had never heard of his name. He wasn't a disciple of Limitless Palace. Naturally, he wouldn't know his name. But the more it was like this, the angrier Yao Yaren became. If the other party knew his name, how would they dare to treat him like this? However, when everyone saw the furious Yao Yaren, they felt even more helpless. Senior brother Yao, that man's identity is not simple. A cultivator reminded, looking at Yao Yaren's angry appearance. It was almost certain that he wanted to find trouble with Bewitching. However, once Yao Yaren went to look for trouble, it would be a dead end. Yao Yaren frowned. Her identity is not simple? No matter how extraordinary his identity is, could he be the young palace master? Yao Yaren sneered. For him to have such a reputation in Limitless Palace, it meant that he wasn't someone ordinary disciples could compare to. Hearing Yao Yaren's words, the cultivator next to him had a look of surprise in his eyes. Senior brother Yao, how did you know? The man exclaimed in surprise. He's the young sect master. As soon as these words came out, Yao Yaren froze for a moment. He looked at the cultivator beside him in surprise, wondering if he had heard wrongly. What did you say? He is the young master of Tiangang sect, the cultivator said immediately. Suddenly, Yao Yaren was dumbfounded. He stared blankly at the cultivator beside him. His eyes widened as he wondered if he had heard wrongly. However, it was obvious that there was almost no possibility of it being wrong. Tiangang sect's young sect master. Wasn't that Bewitching? Chapter 1956. This sense of oppression and pressure was not Yao Yaren's illusion at all. It was real. The original anger and dissatisfaction instantly dissipated into nothingness. And Yao Yaren only felt a burst of fear. If his words just now were a little more extreme, then he really would have lost his life. In front of Tiangang sect's young sect master, what was his identity? If the other party wanted to take his life, it would be a simple matter. If he had known earlier, he would not have offended Bewitching. This was simply courting death. After understanding all this, Yao Yaren's target of anger changed. At this moment, he was most angry with the disciple of the medicinal herb area. Since he knew that Bewitching was such a person that he could not afford to offend, he did not remind him. Not only did he let him suffer such a big loss, he also offended a person that he could not afford to offend. It was really hateful. The disciple of the medicinal herb area had already pretended that he did not see anything and returned to his position. He wanted to remind Yao Yaren earlier, but Yao Yaren did not listen to him at all. Regarding this, he was also very helpless. Not long after, Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching returned to the palace. I wonder if that Yao Yaren still has a hole in his head and wants to take revenge on us? Xiao Hei's eyes flashed with interest. Usually, this kind of person who courted death was not so easy to deal with. Often after teaching them a lesson, they would still recklessly come looking for trouble the next time. It shouldn't be. There are many cultivators near the alchemy hall. And there are also many people who know our identity. I believe that those people should have told Yao Yaren all this. Xiao Bai pondered. If no one told Yao Yaren, then it would be really interesting. That guy totally deserved it. Presumably, after he knows who he has offended, his expression will also be very interesting. Baisher's voice was full of ridicule. When he thought of Yao Yaren's previous actions, he felt very unhappy. Bailey Hongzhuang looked sideways at Bewitching. Bewitching's expression was very indifferent from beginning to end. Obviously, he did not take Yao Yaren seriously at all. He only taught Yao Yaren a lesson, because he felt that Yao Yaren was too troublesome. Bewitching, I think we should go to the desert world later. The time spent in the desert world is longer, and I can refine more pills there. However, I'll need you and White Lion to protect me. Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes flashed with a thoughtful light. Today was the only day that she did not go to Wind Canyon. She still had to continue going tomorrow, so there wasn't much time left for her to refine pills. No matter how he thought about it, this was the most time-saving method. After hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Bewitching thought for a moment and nodded. Okay, The three beasts also showed expressions of approval. With them and Bewitching around, Master definitely wouldn't be disturbed while he was refining pills. Seeing this, Bailey Hongzhuang's lips couldn't help but smile. After returning to the bedroom, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others entered the desert world. The desert world was the same as before. It was vast and boundless. Ever since they came to Limitless Palace, they hadn't come to the desert world for some time. Now that they were here again, they had a different feeling. Bailey Hongzhuang directly took out the pill furnace and placed the herbs beside her one by one. Chapter 1957. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at the cauldron in front of her. It was the cauldron that she had obtained from the remains of the assessment competition. However, she had not had many chances to use the cauldron during this period of time. Coincidentally, she wanted to take this opportunity to see the effects of the cauldron. Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching looked at each other. Bewitching's face blossomed into a smile that made Bailey Hongzhuang feel at ease. With him by Bailey Hongzhuang's side, no demonic beasts would interrupt Bailey Hongzhuang's cultivation. Seeing this, Bailey Hongzhuang felt at ease and began refining pills. From the moment Bailey Hongzhuang began to refine the Dan, her face was filled with a touch of seriousness. She focused all of her mental energy on the control of the fire and sensed everything in detail. As her cultivation level increased, so did her mental energy, making it easier for her to control the control of the fire. However, Bailey Hongzhuang still needed to be fully focused. This was because a slight distraction could cause problems. Furthermore, she had not refined pills for a long time. Naturally, she needed to pay more attention. After seeing Bailey Hongzhuang enter the state of refining pills, the three beasties revealed a look of understanding. Every time their master focused on refining pills, she would no longer pay attention to her surroundings. Instead, she would focus all of her energy on refining pills. Especially when refining important pills, their master would not pay attention to them, even if they were jumping around her. Not only that, they had heard their master say that she was trying something new this time. Although they did not know what their master was trying, they believed that it would not be simple. While the three beasties were deep in thought, Bailey Hongzhuang was also deep in thought. In the past, she had only refined one pill at a time, and had not tried anything else. However, for a pill like the energy recovery pill, which had a high demand, it would be a waste of time if she could only refine one pill at a time. As her abilities increased, not only did she not feel any sense of accomplishment, but she also felt a sense of urgency. This was because the cultivators around her were getting stronger, and the competition was getting more intense. In comparison, she did not need too many cultivation resources in the early stages of her cultivation. However, as she progressed, the demand for cultivation resources increased continuously. Therefore, Bailey Hongzhuang decided to try refining multiple pills. Otherwise, she would need more time to refine pills in the future. Once she succeeded, she could save a lot of trouble in the future. This was not the first time Bailey Hongzhuang thought of trying this. In the past, she had heard from the old fellows in the clan that some alchemists could refine multiple pills at the same time. And they were as rare as a phoenix's feathers ants. However, once an alchemist was able to do this, then this alchemist's level was already completely unmatched by other alchemists. Because their skills had far surpassed other alchemists, Bailey Hongzhuang didn't care how many of these pill masters there were. She only cared if this method was successful. As long as she could do this, she could save a lot of time when refining pills in the future. With her current demand for pills, this would undoubtedly be a great help to her. Chapter 1958. After all, time was the most precious thing. Moreover, the amount of time needed to refine pills wasn't little, and most of the time, refining pills didn't just require one pill but many pills. Hence, this kind of ability was simply too important. Now that her ability wasn't weak, and her mental energy was extremely valiant, she could now try this method. Although the failure rate was very high, but if she succeeded, then all the effort would be worth it. It was because of this that she bought so many sets of medicinal ingredients. If this attempt didn't succeed, she would at least leave 100 sets of medicinal ingredients to refine pills. Bailey Hongzhuang closed her eyes and felt everything in the pill furnace. Just as she had expected, this pill furnace's grade was extremely high and was much stronger than the pill furnace that she had used to refine pills in the past. No matter if it was the perception or transparency, it was far from what the pill furnace in the past could compare to. When refining pills, there was a feeling of being at ease. This was the most important reason why so many pill masters pursued high-quality pill furnaces. A high-quality alchemy furnace could greatly reduce the difficulty of an alchemist's alchemy, and the quality of the refined pills could also be improved. It was truly a powerful weapon. In her previous life, the pill furnace that Bailey Hongzhuang used was also of high quality, but she didn't have any foundation when she transmigrated, so she could only use an ordinary pill furnace. Now that she had this pill furnace, she felt that it was easier for her to find the feeling. As long as she sensed carefully, she would be able to clearly understand the situation in the pill furnace. Her mental energy extended above the pill furnace, and the temperature of the fire, and the changes of the medicinal ingredients were all under her control. The three beasties paid attention to Bailey Hongzhuang, who was concentrating on refining pills, and their eyes couldn't help but be filled with admiration. The grade of the energy recovery pill wasn't high, and with Bailey Hongzhuang's current ability, refining it was an extremely simple matter. Even though Bailey Hongzhuang hadn't refined pills for a period of time, but with the help of this pill furnace, Bailey Hongzhuang still succeeded in refining the first energy recovery pill easily. The rich pill fragrance spread out, and Bailey Hongzhuang then took out the pill and placed it into the white porcelain bottle. Bewitching saw that Bailey Hongzhuang's refining speed was extremely fast, and his eyes were filled with amazement. He also knew that the energy recovery pill's grade wasn't high, but logically speaking, the time required to refine it wasn't short. However, Bailey Hongzhuang's refining time was completely out of his expectations, and it really shocked him. "My wife, your refining speed is really fast." Bewitching sighed. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang smiled slightly. Alchemy is also a matter of practice. Once you refine more, the refining speed will also increase. Although the time needed to refine pills was roughly the same, as long as the alchemist's ability was sufficient, the time needed to refine pills could be shortened. Hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Bewitching also nodded slightly. He had heard about this from the alchemy masters before. However, he didn't expect Bailey Hongzhuang to be able to do this at such a young age. One had to know that the alchemy masters he usually saw were not young anymore. Chapter 1959. However, it seemed that he had underestimated Bailey Hongzhuang. Her ability was much more powerful than he had imagined. After refining the first pill, Bailey Hongzhuang did not stop. Instead, she continued to refine the second pill. After refining 3 pills in a row, Bailey Hongzhuang stopped refining pills. After refining 3 pills, she had completely regained her senses. She also had some confidence in refining 2 pills at the same time. She needed to adjust her state of mind and adjust her mental power to its optimal state before trying again. After Bewitching knew that Bailey Hongzhuang had such thoughts, his heart was filled with astonishment. "Wife, until now, I have never heard of an alchemist who could refine 2 pills at the same time." Bewitching looked at Bailey Hongzhuang in surprise. Even the alchemy masters that he had seen on a daily basis could only refine 1 pill at a time. It would be too difficult to refine 2 or more pills at the same time. "I have also heard of this from my elders. However, I have never seen such an alchemist before." Bailey Hongzhuang admitted frankly. In the past, such alchemists were rare, so she had never seen one with her own eyes. However, she believed that since her elders had said so, such people must exist. Moreover, she had been an alchemist for a long time. This kind of thing was completely feasible in theory. However, there was still a certain distance to the process of success after putting it into practice. However, she did not mind trying. After all, many things that had never happened before only appeared after trying. After Bewitching heard Bailey Hongzhuang's words, a look of contemplation appeared in his eyes. He felt that since Bailey Hongzhuang's elders said so, There must be a possibility. However, now that he had a deeper understanding of Bailey Hongzhuang, he increasingly felt that the difference between 1,000 years later and 1,000 years ago was too great. Wife, logically speaking, although many things from 1,000 years ago have been lost after 1,000 years, we should have made a lot of progress after 1,000 years. But until now, I still feel that the era you were in was more outstanding than the one we are in now. Bewitching could not understand this point. Times had always been improving. No matter what, 1,000 years later should have made greater progress than 1,000 years ago. However, they did not have the pills that had been lost, and other things were not much better than what Hongzhuang knew. Could it be that they had not made any progress in the past 1,000 years? However, after Bewitching's words, a look of doubt appeared in Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes. She also could not understand this point. This was because all of this did not make sense. However, this was the Shengxian continent that they knew. I don't understand this point either. I keep feeling that something is wrong. Perhaps something major had happened in the past 1,000 years, and that's why it has become like this. Bailey Hongzhuang said slowly. With the change of time, many things had improved. However, there could also be some major events that caused history to regress. Seeing this, Bewitching nodded slightly. This was the only way to explain the current situation. Wife, give it a try. If you succeed, it will be a great feat, Bewitching said with a smile. Chapter 1960. Seeing that Bewitching was so supportive of her, the smile in Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes deepened. Her thoughts were the same as Bewitching's. Since she was still so young, why not try more things? There were many things that could only be improved by breaking the norm. While Bailey Hongzhuang was meditating to recover, Bewitching, Xiaohe, and Xiaobai were also cultivating. Only Baisher was eating. Ever since it had not come to the desert world, it had been eating ordinary demon crystals. Hence, it could not help but feel excited when it came to the desert world today. Their master wanted to refine pills here, so they could not leave and go to other places. However, based on its understanding of the demon beasts in the desert world, even if they did not look for these demon beasts would take the initiative to look for them. Hence, this battle was still unavoidable. It only hoped that there would not be too many demon beasts. Otherwise, they would disturb its master's pill refinement. After Bailey Hongzhuang had recovered her condition, she began to try refining 2 pills at the same time. She paid full attention to every change in the alchemy furnace and controlled everything inside. This was the first time she had tried to refine 2 pills at the same time. Hence, there were some areas where even she could not be sure of the correct method. After all, refining 2 pills at the same time was completely different from refining 1 pill. Hence, Bailey Hongzhuang could only continue to fumble around. She carefully controlled the heat and paid attention to the slightest change in the process. Bailey Hongzhuang realized that as the number of medicinal herbs increased, the difficulty of controlling the heat also increased. Qi, a faint and dry voice sounded, followed by a wave of unpleasant smell. Bailey Hongzhuang's expression was filled with impatience. Just as she had expected, even though she had carefully controlled everything, she had still failed in the end. Bewitching saw Bailey Hongzhuang's state and smiled. He continued to cheer for Bailey Hongzhuang. This failure was within their expectations. Hence, there was nothing strange about it. Bailey Hongzhuang's lips curled into a smile. She was afraid that she would continue to sink into this failure. In the following period of time, Bailey Hongzhuang continued to try and fail. During this process, some demon beasts had tried to sneak up on them. However, Bewitching and the 3 beasts had dealt with them perfectly. Bailey Hongzhuang had absolute trust in Bewitching. Hence, even when there were demon beasts around them, Bailey Hongzhuang did not lose her focus. As long as there were not too many demon beasts, she did not have to worry about this problem. The existence of the desert world was undoubtedly a time cheat, allowing her to have more time. In the blink of an eye, 3 days, Bailey Hongzhuang had suffered countless failures. However, it did not extinguish her determination and hope. Although the result was the same, in Bailey Hongzhuang's view, she had more confidence in refining the 2 Dan pills. In the past, He had never had any understanding of this aspect, so he could only seek experience through repeated failures during the refining process. After so many failures, she found that she had a deeper understanding of the situation. Not only did she have a better understanding of refining 2 pills at the same time, but she also had a better understanding of refining pills. Chapter 1961. Bewitching's actions in front of the pill refinery hall had also reached Yu Linfeng and Nangong Wu's ears. However, Yu Linfeng and Nangong Wu didn't care about this. Yao Yaren was the one who had taken the initiative to look for trouble. Since he couldn't beat the other party, he could only blame himself. Linfeng, Hong Zhuang must have gone to the pill refinery hall to buy ingredients, because she doesn't have enough pills. Let's help her. A look of concern flashed across Nangong Wu's eyes. She had some understanding of Bailey Hongzhuang's state of cultivation in the Wind Canyon. She had consumed quite a lot of energy recovery pills every day. According to the information she had received, Bailey Hongzhuang had gone to the pill refinery hall to buy ingredients for the energy recovery pill today. Hearing this, Yu Linfeng smiled faintly. The current Nangong Wu was really concerned about Bailey Hongzhuang. Don't worry, Hongzhuang has her own plans. Her pill refining skills are already very outstanding. If she has the chance to cultivate her pill refining skills, it wouldn't be a bad idea. He knew about Bailey Hongzhuang's attainments in other areas. Although Bailey Hongzhuang's cultivation had increased by quite a bit, she shouldn't just abandon other areas like this. Nangong Wu frowned slightly. She didn't feel that Yu Linfeng's words made sense. From Bailey Hongzhuang's state of cultivation, it could be seen that she desperately wanted to improve. I don't care. I'll bring the ingredients to Hongzhuang tomorrow. Seeing Nangong Wu's determined look, Yu Linfeng felt a little helpless, but could only chuckle softly. Okay. Yu Linfeng smiled faintly. Do whatever you want. Seeing this, Nangong Wu's face revealed a smile. In the following days, Bailey Hongzhuang cultivated in the Wind Canyon during the day, and cultivated on the Heaven Stairway at night. Occasionally, she would go to the desert world to refine pills. Her days were very good. Gradually, Bailey Hongzhuang stayed in the Wind Canyon for longer and longer. Now, only Pei Yifan could compare to her. For hours later, Bailey Hongzhuang wasn't far away. It wouldn't be long before Bailey Hongzhuang could complete the test. On this day, Bailey Hongzhuang was preparing to go to the Wind Canyon to cultivate. When suddenly, He Mu hurriedly appeared in front of her, and Bewitching. Young master, there's news as a message. As He Mu's voice fell, Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching's eyes narrowed, and the atmosphere instantly became tense. Bewitching quickly took the letter from He Mu's hand and opened it. Bailey Hongzhuang's gaze was fixed on the letter in Bewitching's hand. It had been more than half a year since they asked the Heaven Stairway Heart for information. During this period of time, they hadn't received any news. Although she didn't show it on the surface, she couldn't help but worry in her heart. There hadn't been any news for so long. Could it be bad news? Now the news from the Heaven Stairway Heart finally came. Bailey Hongzhuang only felt that her heart was about to stop beating. Her hands under her sleeves couldn't help but clench her clothes. Bailey Hongzhuang was expressionless, but one could see her nervousness and apprehension from her eyes. There were 2 possibilities for this news. One was that they knew the location of their parents, which was undoubtedly excellent news. The second was they couldn't get any more news about their parents. At this moment, Bailey Hongzhuang was extremely nervous. She was so worried that it would be the second possibility. She couldn't bear that kind of result. Chapter 1962. After Bewitching finished reading the contents of the letter, a relaxed smile appeared on his face. Fortunately, the situation wasn't the worst. Bailey Hongzhuang, whose heart had been hanging by a thread, saw the smile on Bewitching's face, and her tightly clenched fists quietly loosened. Bewitching, what does the letter say? Bailey Hongzhuang's ink-black phoenix eyes were fixated on Bewitching. Although she was less apprehensive, she was still somewhat nervous. She had no understanding of her parents' current situation. With Yu Siqing's deranged behavior, she was really worried about how her parents would be tortured. In fact, she didn't even dare to think about it. Di Baichen handed the letter in his hand to Bailey Hongzhuang and said, "The Heaven Slaughter Pavilion has already found the location where your parents are being held. However, it's within the Yu clan, so it won't be easy for us to rescue them." In his opinion, as long as he knew that Hongzhuang's parents were still alive, it was already the best news. Although it would be very difficult to rescue them, there would always be a way. As long as they made proper arrangements, there would definitely be a way. Bailey Hongzhuang quickly finished reading the contents of the letter, and her heart relaxed a little. The contents of the letter were very simple, but every sentence contained important information. Lan Yunxiao and Mu Lingbing were being held in the Yu clan in the dungeon below Yu Xiqing's residence. All these years, Lan Yunxiao and Mu Lingbing were often tortured by Yu Xiqing, so their injuries were probably very serious. However, the only thing worth rejoicing over was that their bodies weren't crippled. Even if they were rescued, they would probably need to recuperate for a long time before they could recover. Bailey Hongzhuang read the contents of the letter. This situation was within her expectations. With Yu Xiqing's abnormal behavior, the torture was definitely unavoidable. Most importantly, Yu Xiqing had actually imprisoned her parents in her residence. This made torturing them even more convenient. In Bailey Hongzhuang's heart, there was a faint guess. After all, Yu Xiqing's medical skills were superb, and her poison skills were also outstanding. Anyone who studied the art of medicine and poison would have to do experiments on a daily basis. She felt that it was very likely that Yu Xiqing would use her parents as test subjects. If not for this, Yu Xiqing would not have needed to imprison her parents in such a close place. Thinking of this, Bailey Hongzhuang's heart tightened. Doing experiments was extremely cruel. If Yu Xiqing really did that, then she would let Yu Xiqing be her test subject in the future. Now that we have confirmed the location of my parents, when should we set off to rescue them? Bailey Hongzhuang didn't lose her cool after hearing the news. She needed to remain calm at such a time. Otherwise, if something went wrong during the rescue, they wouldn't even have the chance to regret it. The Yu clan is heavily guarded, and Yu Xiqing usually stays in her room. I'm afraid it will be very difficult for us to rescue Uncle and Auntie without anyone noticing. Di Baichen's eyes were filled with contemplation. Now wasn't the time to completely fall out with the Yu clan. Right now, the most important thing was to rescue Uncle and Auntie, so it wasn't appropriate to act rashly and alert the enemy. As for how to rescue them, they needed to plan at length. Chapter 1963. Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Baichen immediately returned to their sleeping quarters. After hearing this news, Bailey Hongzhuang clearly no longer had any thoughts of going to Wine Canyon to cultivate. Right now, she only wanted to save her parents and escape from that sea of suffering. If Lan Yunxiao and Mu Lingbing didn't want to save her, they wouldn't have gone to the Yu clan to seek medical treatment and exposed their whereabouts. Speaking of which, all the pain they had suffered all these years was because of her. The three beasties also sat quietly beside Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Baichen. They were also extremely concerned about this matter. After waiting for so long, they finally received news. Now they needed to formulate a plan to save them. That's right. We really need to think of a plan to lure the tiger away from the mountain. Di Baichen nodded. According to the information he obtained from his master, Yu Xiqing's strength was also very strong. If they were to face Yu Xiqing directly, their strength wouldn't be her opponent at all. Before this, he had already investigated Yu Xiqing's situation. This woman didn't like anyone else all these years. She shut herself in her room all day long. No one knew what she was doing. It wasn't an easy thing to make Yu Xiqing leave her room. Moreover, the Yu clan was heavily guarded. It was really too difficult to do this. Bailey Hongzhuang frowned and pondered. She didn't know much about Yu Xiqing. How could they make Yu Xiqing leave? For a while, she really couldn't think of a way. Mo Yunjue and the others are waiting for us in a city near the Yu clan. We'll meet up with them at that time, and then act together. Di Baichen continued. In this letter, Mo Yunjue had already explained this point. Obviously, Mo Yunjue planned to help them to the end. Di Baichen was also very grateful to Mo Yunjue for his help. Yu Xiqing had hidden everything so well. He couldn't get any news even after asking around for a long time. The Shirtian Pavilion must have spent a lot of effort to find out. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly. However, we have to figure out what to do first. Master, why don't we let the sect leader go personally and lure Yu Siqing away before we make our move? Xiaobai suggested. Although Yu Siqing rarely left the house, Situ Yin had gone to look for her before. As long as Situ Yin went there again, Yu Siqing would definitely leave the house. Di Beichen shook his head slightly. That Yu Siqing is extremely cunning. I heard from my master that the last time he went to question Yu Siqing only stood at the back door of the Yu clan and talked to him. She didn't even leave the Yu clan's territory. Yu Siqing knew how much her master hated her, so she didn't dare to go anywhere else for fear of taking her life. Even if her master went there again, Yu Siqing would not be far away. Then she will be the first to notice our movements. Hearing Di Beichen's words, Bailey Hongzhuang frowned even more. This Yu Siqing was indeed a cunning old fox. However, with the things that Yu Siqing had done in the past, it was normal for her grandfather to want her life. If this method doesn't work, what else can we do? Xiao He was puzzled. Then, should we just let someone pass the message that someone is looking for her and ask her to leave? Chapter 1964. Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen racked their brains, but they couldn't come up with anything. The only thing they could think of was to find something that Yu Siqing was interested in. This way, Yu Siqing would naturally be attracted away. Moreover, they were going to rescue someone this time, so there wouldn't be a lot of people going. A direct confrontation would be disastrous, so they could only avoid it as much as possible. As for digging an underground tunnel, that was obviously impossible. For a moment, the two were at their wits' end. Di Beichen, why don't we tell grandfather about this first, and see if he has any ideas? Bailey Hongzhuang slowly suggested. In this situation, they could only hope that there was strength in numbers. Si Tuyen had more experience than them, and he had a better understanding of Yu Siqing. Perhaps he would have a good idea. Di Beichen nodded. I'll have Heimu pass this news to Master immediately. For a long time, Master had also been waiting for news from Lan Yunxiao and his wife. He believed that Master would be extremely excited when he heard the news. Suddenly, Di Beichen's eyes changed slightly as he asked, Wifey, who do you think Yu Siqing cares about the most? Grandfather? Bailey Hongzhuang raised her brows, not understanding Di Beichen's meaning. All these years, Yu Siqing had never liked another man other than her grandfather. Just from this point alone, one could see how much Yu Siqing liked her grandfather. However, when Bailey Hongzhuang noticed Di Beichen's deep gaze, another name appeared in Bailey Hongzhuang's mind. Grandmother. From the beginning, Yu Siqing was filled with jealousy towards Mu Jin's. Back in Tiangang sect, Yu Siqing was already jealous of Mu Jin's. And all these years, everything that Si Tuyen had done made Yu Siqing even more jealous of Mu Jin's. Mu Jin's had left for so many years, but Si Tuyen had never given up on searching for her. Yu Siqing had chased after Si Tuyen for so many years, but Si Tuyen hadn't even spared her a glance. Thus, all these years, the person she hated and cared about the most was Mu Jin's. If not for this, Yu Siqing wouldn't have thought of ways to torture Mu Lingbing and Bailey Hongzhuang. Seeing that Bailey Hongzhuang understood so quickly, Di Beichen's eyes shone with admiration. That's right. If we use Master's wife's name to lure the tiger away from the mountain, perhaps it will have a better effect. Di Beichen thought. Wife, what do you think? A bright light shone in his deep phoenix eyes. This is indeed a feasible method. As a woman herself used SS. In front of S's was. S's. SAS with S. Let's discuss this with grandfather and come up with a solution. After knowing the location of her parents, Bailey Hongzhuang wasn't as anxious as before. No matter what, she had to think of a safe way to succeed in one go. Otherwise, once Yu Siqing found out, the situation would become even more serious. Di Beichen quickly wrote a letter and handed it to Heimu, ordering him to send this news back to Tiangang sect. Master also needed to know this news immediately. Chapter 1965. After Heimu left, Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen pondered for a while before Bailey Hongzhuang spoke. Beichen, let's inform Master and Mistress of this news. They had seen with their own eyes how well Master and Mistress had treated her these few days. Moreover, Master and Mistress were very concerned about news of her parents. Perhaps Master and Mistress would come up with some good ideas. All right. Di Beichen nodded without hesitation. He and Bailey Hongzhuang had stayed in Limitless Palace for so long. They were very clear about the sincerity of Palace Master Yu and Mistress Yu. Now that they were in the same camp as Palace Master Yu and Mistress Yu, they naturally wouldn't hide the news from them. Just as Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen were about to leave, a voice came from outside the house. What news do you have for us? Nangong Wu's face was still blooming with a bright and flamboyant smile. No matter when or where, she was always so eye-catching, and people would notice her at a glance. Seeing Yu Linfeng and Nangong Wu's appearance, Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes were filled with a joyful smile. Master, Mistress, why are you free today? Bailey Hongzhuang was a little surprised. She was just about to look for Master and Mistress Yu, and they were already here. I know that you didn't go to Wine Canyon to cultivate today, so I came to take a look. However, I heard that you were going to look for us the moment I arrived. What's the matter? Nangong Wu asked with a smile. During the days when Hongzhuang was in Limitless Palace, she had seen her hard work clearly. Therefore, she admired Bailey Hongzhuang even more. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen looked at each other, with a serious expression on their faces. Seeing Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen's expressions, Yu Linfeng and Nangong Wu's expressions also changed a little. It seemed that what Bailey Hongzhuang and Mistress Yu wanted to tell them wasn't simple. Master, Mistress Yu, we just received news from Shirtian Pavilion. As soon as he said this, Yu Linfeng and Nangong Wu's expressions changed. At this moment, they also understood why Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen would reveal such a serious expression. What's the result? Yu Linfeng asked in a deep voice. Now we have determined the location where Hongzhuang's parents are being held. However, the location is very sensitive. It's very difficult to rescue them without anyone knowing. Di Beichen's eyes revealed a dignified expression. He slowly told the contents of the letter to Yu Linfeng and Nangong Wu. After knowing all this, Nangong Wu couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. As long as the location of Hongzhuang's parents is confirmed, this is great news. She had always been worried about Hongzhuang's identity. If something happened to her parents, she was afraid that Hongzhuang wouldn't be able to bear it. Fortunately, God wasn't so cruel to Hongzhuang. At least, she still had a chance to reunite with her parents. You're saying that Hongzhuang's parents are being held under Yu Xiqing's residence? Yu Linfeng walked to Di Beichen's side and sat down. His eyes were heavy and thoughtful. Di Beichen nodded slightly, and told Yu Linfeng in detail about the information he learned when he investigated Yu Xiqing. At this time, he also hoped that Yu Linfeng could give them some advice. Chapter 1966. If that's the case, then Yu Xiqing doesn't want others to know that she has imprisoned the Lan couple. Ordinary matters wouldn't be able to lure the tiger away from the mountain, so Yu Xiqing definitely wouldn't leave so easily. Yu Linfeng's eyes flashed with a complicated light of wisdom. Just from Yu Xiqing's actions these past few years, he was able to deduce a lot of things. Di Beichen told Yu Linfeng about the plan that he and Bailey Hongzhuang had thought of. Palace Master Yu, do you think this will work? As the Palace Master of Limitless Palace, Yu Linfeng had led Limitless Palace to its current position. His methods were far from ordinary people's, so his opinion must be extremely important. The method you mentioned has a certain degree of feasibility, but you don't have enough understanding of Mu Jin's. On the contrary, Yu Xiqing and Mu Jin's have been sisters for so many years, so she understands her very well. If Yu Xiqing sees through you when you use this, she will definitely be vigilant, and everything will not be so easy. Hearing Yu Linfeng's words, Bailey Hongzhuang's heart turned cold. It seemed that they really didn't have any other way to resolve this. Nangong Wu couldn't help but frown as she listened to Yu Linfeng and Di Beichen discussing such a complicated matter. In her opinion, this was a very simple matter. However, in the eyes of others, this matter was complicated enough. If you ask me, We should use the simplest method to resolve this matter, Nangongwu said. Following Nangongwu's words, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two couldn't help but look at Nangongwu. They didn't know what method Nangongwu had thought of. If we directly throw some explosives into the Yu clan, it will definitely cause a commotion. Yu Xiqing's position in the Yu clan isn't low, so she will naturally go and take a look. Furthermore, in this kind of situation, the Yu clan will definitely be in chaos. You can take advantage of the chaos to rescue Hongzhuang's parents. As soon as she said this, Bailey Hongzhuang, Bewitching and Yu Linfeng looked at each other, a bright light appearing in their eyes. This method is indeed not bad. Bailey Hongzhuang's face revealed a look of understanding. She had originally wanted to cause a certain amount of chaos in the Yu clan, so that it would be easier for them to move. However, it wasn't easy to create chaos. If all the Yu clan members were running around, it would have to create a huge disturbance. After thinking about it, Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't think of a good idea. However, after Nangongwu's reminder, she finally understood the reason behind it. Yu Xiqing's the Yu Xiqing was Yu Xiqing, S. TSS to T to them Yu, S to B. T, S to B. He believed that Yu Xiqing wouldn't notice this either. Let's do as your mistress says, Yu Linfeng said with certainty. Just do as I say. Nangongwu obviously didn't expect everyone to agree with her idea. In fact, she was just casually saying it. She usually liked to study explosives, so when she talked about this matter, she also mentioned explosives. However, she didn't expect this matter to be decided like this. Wasn't this a very difficult problem to solve? Why did they decide in such a short time? Nangongwu couldn't understand. Chapter 1967. Bailey Hongzhuang, Bewitching, and Yu Linfeng all looked at Nangongwu. They nodded and smiled. That's right. Seeing this, Nangongwu was stunned for a moment. Then she laughed out loud. Ha ha ha, I knew that my idea was good. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others looked at each other and smiled. Bailey Hongzhuang's nervousness and worry quickly dissipated. Previously, she had not been able to think of a good solution, so she was very worried. Her parents had suffered too much these few years. She also hoped that she could save them as soon as possible. After all, one less day of pain and suffering was extremely good. She believed that these few years, every day felt like a year to her parents. She did not know what kind of faith her parents relied on to persevere until now. As their daughter, she only wanted to save her parents as soon as possible and reunite with them. Until now, she did not know what her parents looked like. When they had separated, she was still too young. Thus, she did not have any impression of them. Fortunately, this day was not far away from them. Since we have decided to use explosives, Hongzhuang, from today onwards, you will develop explosives with me. Nangongwu's face was filled with excitement. She had wanted to develop explosives with Hongzhuang before. However, after Hongzhuang came to Limitless Palace, she put all her energy into cultivation. She did not want to disturb her. Now, she didn't think that her method would be used in such a way. The Yu clan was not an ordinary clan. If they wanted to have a certain influence in the Yu clan, it would not be an easy task. At the very least, the grade of explosives they needed to use must not be low. If their influence was small, then it would not have any influence on the Yu clan. Hongzhuang and the others' rescue plan would not succeed. Hearing Nangongwu's words, Bailey Hongzhuang nodded. No problem. From today onwards, I will develop explosives with Master's wife. She didn't have any understanding of explosives, and she couldn't guarantee that she had some talent in this area. However, no matter what, she had to give it a try. Since Ma Em was so interested in this, he believed that Ma Em knew a lot about explosives. She was only helping her master's wife. It would be best if she could achieve better results. Madam Yu, if you don't mind, why don't I research it together with you? At a time like this, every extra bit of strength was extremely important. After all, time waits for no man. If he could be of some help, that would be great. Nangongwu smiled and nodded. That would be for the best. Usually, she was the only one doing the research. Now, in addition to Bailey Hongzhuang, there was also Bewitching, which made the research even better. She had been studying explosives for a long time, so she knew a lot about them. However, developing explosives also required a certain amount of talent. She always felt that the explosives she developed were lacking something. She had heard that Hong Zhuang was very accomplished in many areas. Maybe Hong Zhuang also had a very good talent in this area. Many times, developing explosives also required a certain amount of imagination. If there was someone to communicate with, she believed that it would be better. Chapter 1968. Nan Gongwu had always had a special fondness for developing explosives. However, there weren't many people in the Shengxian continent who could develop explosives. After all, the majority of cultivators focused their energy on cultivation. Explosives were only a supplementary item. It wasn't that Yu Linfeng didn't want to accompany Nan Gongwu in developing explosives. However, he didn't have any talent in this area. Thus, even though he usually listened to Nan Gongwu's complaints and dissatisfaction, he couldn't do anything about it. Now that they had reached this step, the county magistrate was stunned. Bailey Hong Zhuang and Di Beichen's focus was on developing explosives. As a result, Nan Gongwu wouldn't complain about him anymore. All in all, everything was developing in a good direction. As long as they could save Bailey Hong Zhuang's parents, many problems could be solved one by one. The three beasties were also filled with enthusiasm. Although they could only watch from the side when their master was refining pills or drawing inscriptions, they shouldn't be too complicated. However, the explosives shouldn't be too complicated. Perhaps they would be able to do something. Since we've already decided, let's go now. Nan Gongwu's eyes were filled with excitement. Since they had already decided on their next course of action, they didn't need to stay here any longer. The earlier they started, the earlier they could start the rescue. Following Nan Gongwu's words, Bailey Hong Zhuang and Di Beichen looked at each other and nodded. Right now, the most important thing for them was to save Lan Yunxiao and Nan Gongwu. Nothing else mattered. In the next moment, Bailey Hong Zhuang and Di Beichen followed behind Nan Gongwu and headed towards Nan Gongwu's palace. Behind Nan Gongwu's palace, there was a place where Nan Gongwu specialized in developing explosives. Usually, other than Nan Gongwu, no one else would go there. Yu Linfeng did not go with Nan Gongwu and the others. He had to order someone to find someone who could make explosives. Furthermore, this information had to be kept secret. After all, the slightest movement between the major forces would be noticed by others. At that time, the matter of the Yu clan being suddenly attacked would definitely be known by many people. If other people knew that he was looking for the person who developed the explosives, they would easily associate it with him. Actually, he was not afraid of the Yu clan. However, as Bailey Hong Zhuang's master, he naturally had to think for Bailey Hong Zhuang. Now was not the time to expose himself. When Bailey Hong Zhuang walked into the room where Nan Gongwu was developing the explosives, her eyes couldn't help but be filled with amazement. This was truly a well-equipped workshop. Although she didn't know much about explosives, she could tell from the layout of this place and the things that filled it. After seeing this scene, Di Beichen also felt that Nan Gongwu was unusually fond of this aspect. With such a complete set of equipment, it could be seen that Nan Gongwu had spent a lot of effort in this area. Mistress, you have so many things here. Bailey Hong Zhuang sighed. No matter if it was refining pills or drawing inscriptions, there were many things that were needed. However, her arrangement was not as complete as mistress's. Seeing Bailey Hong Zhuang and Di Beichen's amazed expressions, Nan Gongwu felt a burst of happiness in her heart. Chapter 1969. Of course, Nan Gongwu's interest was instantly piqued. I always feel that my cultivation speed is too slow. If I have this explosive, I can throw it at whoever I'm unhappy with. Wouldn't that be much more convenient? Listening to Nan Gongwu's words, Bailey Hong Zhuang finally understood why Nan Gongwu liked explosives so much. It turned out that this was the root cause. After being together for such a long time, she had a certain understanding of her master's wife's character. Master's wife's character could be described with 4 words. Simple and crude. If you can make a move, don't talk. Therefore, Every time Master's wife appeared, she would be in a hurry. However, Master's wife's simplicity and purity was something that many people couldn't achieve. It's indeed a lot more convenient. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled faintly, just like what Nangong Wu said. If the explosive was strong enough and didn't require the use of elemental energy, it would be an excellent method to achieve a strong effect as long as it was thrown out. It was a pity that after the explosive's power reached a certain level, it couldn't be improved anymore. Therefore, most people still put their energy into improving their own cultivation. It wasn't a long-term solution. Even if they spent more time researching, they wouldn't be able to achieve good results. I always feel that the explosive's power can also be improved continuously. Just like how our alchemy skills can also be improved continuously. There are many grades of elixirs. Explosives should also be divided into many grades. Nangong Wu said her opinion. Many people told her that studying explosives was useless. When a cultivator's strength reached a certain level, explosives wouldn't be able to affect them at all. Nangong Wu didn't think so. She just felt that there might be other methods that they hadn't discovered yet. Listening to Nangong Wu's words, Bailey Hongzhuang didn't comment. No one could say that Nangong Wu's idea was wrong, because there were many things in this world that others didn't know. Not knowing now didn't mean that it was wrong. However, it was not an easy task to research all of this. Perhaps he would be lucky enough to succeed, or perhaps he would never be able to figure it out in his lifetime. These were all possibilities. Hongzhuang, you and Bewitching don't know much about explosives, right? Nangong Wu asked. Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching nodded in unison. Indeed, they did not know about this before. Seeing this, Nangong Wu was not surprised. She immediately took some books from the workshop and passed them to Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching. Take a look at the contents of the book first. The general idea is written in the book. When you have a general understanding of the situation, we will study it together. In the next 2 days, I will make some explosives on my own. I hope they can be of help, Nangong Wu said slowly. She hoped that someone would have the same hobby as her. However, rescuing Hongzhuang's parents was such an important matter that it wasn't a joke. If Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching didn't have any knowledge in this area, then she would have to rely on her to develop some powerful explosives. At least she could guarantee that these explosives would cause a stir in the Yu clan. Chapter 1970. Taking the book that Nangong Wu handed over, Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly. Mistress, I will memorize the contents of this book as soon as possible. Good luck. Nangong Wu's face was filled with a faint smile. She was full of expectations for Bailey Hongzhuang. She always felt that Bailey Hongzhuang had outstanding achievements in so many aspects. She might be the same in this aspect. After all, talent was extremely important. Yu Linfeng was also an extremely intelligent person. However, he did not have any achievements in explosives. This did not mean that he was not good enough. Next, Bailey Hongzhuang saw that Nangong Wu was concentrating on studying explosives. The serious Nangong Wu was completely different from her usual self. It was as if at this moment, her eyes were only focused on the raw materials for making explosives. Looking at Nangong Wu like this, Bailey Hongzhuang already understood her focus on explosives. If she did not like it very much, she would never show such a focused and addicted look. It was just like when she was studying medicine. She had put all her attention on it, and nothing could affect her. After seeing Nangong Wu's focused and serious look, Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching looked at each other. In the end, they decided to go back first, and not disturb Nangong Wu. After all, they could not do anything to help now. Even if they stood by the side, they would not be of any use. After Bailey Hongzhuang returned to her bedchamber, she began to read the contents related to explosives seriously. There were not many books. As long as she calmed down and read, it would not take too long to finish reading. Xiao He and Xiao Bai sat on Bailey Hongzhuang's shoulder and read seriously with Bailey Hongzhuang. They were also somewhat interested in explosives. Bai Shi sat next to Bewitching to study together. He also hoped that he could help. At night, Bewitching finally decided to return to Tiangang sect by himself. He needed to tell his master about this plan, so that his master could help them make a better judgment. After all, Mu Lingbing was his master's daughter. His master would definitely care about her. In this regard, Bailey Hongzhuang nodded in agreement. She also felt that it was better for Di Beichen to explain this matter properly. Perhaps his grandfather would have a better idea. Or perhaps his grandfather would directly come to Limitless Palace. Right now, she had to research explosives with her master's wife, so she couldn't leave. After Di Beichen left, Bailey Hongzhuang and the three beasts focused on reading about explosives. She needed to engrave all of this in her heart before she could think of a solution with her mistress. She could conclude that Shermu had been researching explosives for so long and wanted someone to communicate with her. She must have encountered a bottleneck. If that wasn't the case, Master's wife wouldn't be so anxious. Bottlenecks, whether in cultivation or other aspects, were an extremely torturous existence. If one could not break through the bottleneck, then they would be stagnant. In the next 3 days, Bailey Hongzhuang focused all her energy on reading. The three beasts knew how important this matter was. Hence, they did not disturb Bailey Hongzhuang. Instead, they tried their best to engrave all of this in their hearts. Nangong Wu also knew that Bailey Hongzhuang must be reading, so she did not look for Bailey Hongzhuang. Chapter 1971. Yu Linfeng felt a little helpless as he looked at Nangong Wu's serious and persistent look. Nangong Wu was usually very interested in developing explosives, and now she had even more reason to continue her research. Although he was a little worried about Nangong Wu, he did not stop her. After all, this matter was very important. With Yu Xiqing's status in the Yu family, ordinary explosives would not be able to attract her. But to create an explosive that even Yu Xiqing had to pay attention to, that wasn't a simple matter. Perhaps they would have to put in more effort in this aspect. After 3 days, Bailey Hongzhuang finally finished reading all the books. Originally, she did not know anything about developing explosives, but after reading so many books, she understood quite a lot. At least, she now understood how to create ordinary explosives. However, if she wanted to make a powerful explosive, she still needed to know more about it. Should I go and learn from Mistress now? Bailey Hongzhuang thought and said. Hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words, the three beasties could not help but look at each other and said, Master, you haven't rested for 3 days and 3 nights. You should take a rest first. Seeing Bailey Hongzhuang working so hard, the three beasties felt their hearts ache. They understood that their master wanted to save her parents, but they could not be too anxious in this situation. If their master did not take good care of herself, and something happened to her, it would be worse. Before Di Beichen left, he had specially instructed them to take good care of their master. With Di Beichen's understanding of their master, he had already predicted that Bailey Hongzhuang would work hard day and night. I'm in a good condition now. There's no problem. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled faintly. She had waited for so long and finally heard news about her parents. She only wished that she could end her parents' pain as soon as possible. Master, you don't seem to be in good spirits, Xiao He said with a frown. Xiao Bai quickly followed up. Master, if you're not in the right state of mind and something dangerous happens during the process of developing the explosives, that would be terrible. In my opinion, it would be better for you to rest for a while and go there full of energy. The palace mistress will be happier to see you. Master, you should rest for a while, White Lion said. Listening to the advice of the three beasts, Bailey Hongzhuang thought for a moment. She only felt that the words of the three beasts had some truth to them. She didn't really care about herself. But presumably, Mistress was also working hard for her. If she went there in high spirits, Mistress would be even happier. On the other hand, if his mental state was not good, it would affect his master's wife. That would be bad. I'll rest for a while. You guys should rest too. You must be tired after these 3 days. Bailey Hongzhuang's voice was gentle. In the 3 days that she had been reading, the three beasts had been studying by her side and had never complained. 3 days and 3 nights without rest would indeed be a little tiring. Presumably the three beasts were the same. Seeing that Bailey Hongzhuang had agreed, the three beasts' eyes lit up with excitement. Master, let's rest together. We'll look for the palace mistress after we wake up, White Lion said with a smile. Chapter 1972. Bailey Hongzhuang had fallen into a deep sleep not long after she had closed her eyes. Over the past 3 days, she had been trying her best to memorize the contents of the book. At the same time that she was forcing herself to memorize the contents, the consumption of her spiritual energy was not small either. Hence, when she closed her eyes, Bailey Hongzhuang felt her head sink, and a wave of exhaustion washed over her. The three beasts situation was not any better than Bailey Hongzhuang's. On the contrary, they were in a worse state. After all, they did not have Bailey Hongzhuang's abnormal spiritual energy. Hence, over the past 3 days, their heads had become as heavy as 1,000 caddies. Bailey Hongzhuang was resting in a daze when suddenly, a strand of spiritual energy was quietly drawn into the chaos ring and entered it. Bailey Hongzhuang felt as if she was dreaming. She had entered the chaos ring, and a new stone room had appeared in the chaos ring. As she opened the door to the stone room, she saw that the situation in the stone room was just like Nangong Wu's explosives workshop. It was fully equipped. The situation was exactly the same as the first time Bailey Hongzhuang had entered the inscription stone room. There was even a middle-aged man who was explaining the important points of making explosives and demonstrating how to make explosives. When Bailey Hongzhuang woke up from this dream, she could not help but laugh. She really dreamed about what she thought about during the day. If the chaos ring really had such a stone room, how great would that be? Now, she really hoped that she would have the chance to learn how to make explosives. If she was really accomplished in this area, she would not mind throwing a few more at the Yu family. Now, she only hoped that the explosives that Mistress had made would have such an effect. Otherwise, the rescue mission would be really difficult. When Bailey Hongzhuang woke up, she saw the three beasts sleeping soundly next to her, and her gaze softened. The three beasts had been accompanying her for the past 3 days. Speaking of which, they were really very concerned about her. Since the three beasts had yet to wake up, Bailey Hongzhuang hesitated for a moment. If she left just like that, the three beasts would definitely be very depressed when they woke up. Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but think of the dream she had. Although she knew it was a dream, the scene in the dream was too real. She also wanted to take a look inside the chaos ring. Now that her strength had improved to a certain extent, it was reasonable to say that a new door to the stone room should be opened. In the next instant, Bailey Hongzhuang entered the chaos ring. Every time a new door opened in the chaos ring, it would be of great help to her. If it weren't for the chaos ring, she wouldn't have been able to enrich herself like this. Therefore, she had been looking forward to the opening of the new stone room. However, when Bailey Hongzhuang entered the chaos ring, she was surprised to find that there really was a door to a stone room that had opened. Seeing this scene, Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes couldn't help but be filled with excitement. In her line of sight, the appearance of the stone room's door was exactly the same as it had been in her dream. I wonder what's inside. Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes sparkled with anticipation. She really wanted to know what was inside. If it really was an explosives workshop, that was simply impossible, right? Chapter 1973. This was because the scene in front of her eyes was exactly the same as what Bailey Hongzhuang had seen in her dreams. The familiar scene, the neatly arranged explosives workshop. Bailey Hongzhuang had thought that Nangong Wu's explosives workshop already had everything she needed. However, the explosives workshop in front of her eyes was undoubtedly larger than Nangong Wu's, and it was even more complete. Besides a few things that she could recognize, there were also many things that she could not recognize. This was simply too shocking. Oh my God! Bailey Hongzhuang's face was filled with shock, followed by a thick sense of surprise. She had never thought that her wish would come true. She had originally hoped that the Chaos Ring would teach her how to make explosives. This was because according to her understanding of the Chaos Ring, the things inside were often extremely comprehensive and were much stronger than the things in the outside world. Just like inscription techniques, she had never come into contact with inscription techniques in her previous life, and did not have much understanding of inscription techniques. However, after studying inscription techniques in the Chaos Ring for a period of time, she had interacted with the inscription masters of the Shangxian continent and discovered that her inscription techniques were already quite good. Just from this point alone, she could judge the power of the Chaos Ring. However, she had never thought that when she was so anxious, the Chaos Ring would send charcoal in snowy weather and provide her with such timely help. At this moment, Bailey Hongzhuang could not help but sigh. The Chaos Ring was truly a divine tool. Ordinary things simply could not be compared with such a divine tool. In the explosives workshop, a middle-aged uncle was configuring and explaining the uses of the explosives. The uncle's face was covered with a full beard, revealing a bit of the vicissitudes of life. He looked at the explosives with an indescribable focus. Bailey Hongzhuang immediately understood that this uncle was very good at configuring explosives. As Bailey Hongzhuang walked closer and sat down in front of the middle-aged uncle, the uncle's gaze fell upon Bailey Hongzhuang. Explosives are a type of weapon. Many people think that the power of explosives is not great enough. Besides causing harm to the common people, as long as a cultivator's strength is strong enough, they will be able to escape from the power of explosives. However, this is not the case. Those people don't understand explosives at all. That's why they said such things. Explosives have many powerful aspects. As long as you are capable enough, you can definitely hurt a powerful cultivator. If a cultivator wanted to use a martial technique, they would need to form hand seals, but explosives could be used instantly. Just from this point alone, we can see how powerful the explosives are. The man explained everything about explosives to Bailey Hongzhuang, a layman. Bailey Hongzhuang listened attentively. She found that the uncle in front of her was talking about the same thing as the master's wife. Master's wife also said that there should be many grades of explosives. It was not that the explosives themselves were not powerful enough to affect powerful cultivators. It was because the people who developed the explosives were not strong enough, and the level of the explosives they made was not high enough, so it could not affect them. In fact, explosives were also divided into different grades. The explosives developed by some geniuses would often have an incomparably powerful influence. Bailey Hongzhuang listened attentively to the uncle's narration and committed the important information to memory. Chapter 1974. Bailey Hongzhuang listened attentively to the uncle's introduction. Compared to reading a book, learning by example was much faster. Moreover, the Chaos Ring was mysterious, and the way the uncle introduced it was concise and comprehensive. As long as it was something important, he would specifically remind Bailey Hongzhuang to remember it. If it was something unimportant, he would directly skip over it, so that Bailey Hongzhuang did not have to remember it at all. When Bailey Hongzhuang had read the book before, she only felt that the contents of the book were rather muddled. However, she had never come into contact with explosives before, so she could not identify these things. She could only remember everything in her heart. She was waiting to learn from her master's wife, so that she could study properly. Bailey Hongzhuang memorized the important contents one by one. Her spiritual power was already very outstanding, and her memory was also very good. With the two combined, Bailey Hongzhuang memorized the knowledge very quickly. Just like when she had first come into contact with inscriptions. Although the situation of explosives was not as complicated as inscriptions, it was still not simple. This was because the amount of each ingredient would affect the effect of the explosives. If the wrong amount was placed, it could lead to injuries. Speaking of alchemy, inscription and explosives, the explosives technique was the most dangerous of them all. Therefore, when developing explosives, one needed to be 100% careful. Otherwise, if there were any problems, it could lead to injuries. In the process of learning, Bailey Hongzhuang understood that there were not many people in the Shangxian continent who understood explosives, and there were even fewer people who were good at explosives. However, it was clear that the middle-aged uncle in front of her was extremely good at explosives. Bailey Hongzhuang forgot about the time when she started learning, and she greedily absorbed the knowledge. Obviously, learning from this uncle would increase their efficiency by a lot. Master's wife must be helping to develop explosives now. So it was also very good for her to learn more here. Perhaps, in a short period of time, she would not be able to create powerful explosives, but she could share some ideas with Master's wife. In this way there was hope for all of this. If possible, Bailey Hongzhuang hoped that Master's wife could come to the Chaos Ring with her. With Nangong Wu's obsession with explosives, she would definitely be overjoyed if she saw this middle-aged man. Unfortunately, Nangong Wu could not enter. Bailey Hongzhuang had already tried this before. After telling Di Beichen the secret of the Chaos Ring, she had intended to let Di Beichen understand it as well. If Di Beichen was interested, then it would be great if he could learn some inscription techniques. However, Di Beichen could not enter at all. She also felt that this was very strange. However, Di Beichen had tried many times. Even when Bailey Hongzhuang opened the door, Di Beichen could only see a blank space. However, the three beasts could see it. After thinking about it, Bailey Hongzhuang and others felt that this must be the owner of the Chaos Ring was Bailey Hongzhuang. So many things could only be used by Bailey Hongzhuang. Although the three beasts could see the situation inside, they had no feeling for this thing, and could not learn it. Speaking of which, the only person who could use this was Bailey Hongzhuang. Just like this demon-calling scripture, Bailey Hongzhuang could not tell its contents to other cultivators. Therefore, in this situation, Master's wife obviously could not learn it. Chapter 1975. When the three beasties awoke, they were stunned. They never thought that their master would disappear after a short nap. How long have we been asleep? Xiao He was dumbfounded. She had felt dizzy after she had closed her eyes. Now that she had woken up, she felt much more comfortable. However, she did not know how long she had slept for. The three beasties stared at each other as they listened to Xiao He's explanation. In reality, none of them knew how long they had slept. Could it be that Master has gone to the palace mistress's place? White Lion asked. He had only rested after seeing that his master had rested. However, his master's spiritual power was extremely powerful, so her recovery time should be shorter than theirs. Perhaps Master had noticed that they showed no signs of waking up, so she had left first. Hearing White Lion's words, Xiao He and Xiao Bai immediately straightened their backs. If that was really the case, they should hurry and find their master. Master would not be in any danger in the limitless palace. However, they would only feel at ease if they were by Master's side. Just as the three beasties were about to set off for the explosives workshop, a faint light suddenly appeared in their line of sight. The three beasties' eyes lit up. Isn't that the Chaos Ring? Master must have entered the Chaos Ring. White Lion immediately understood. This was the same situation when they had gone to the desert world on a daily basis. Since Master had entered the desert world, the Chaos Ring had revealed itself. The three beasties looked at each other and smiled. They then entered the Chaos Ring together. When the three beasties arrived at the Chaos Ring, they did not see Bailey Hongzhuang, so they began to search for her. Judging by the situation, Master must have stayed in the Chaos Ring for quite some time. However, there's no place in the Chaos Ring for her to go. Xiao He frowned. Although the Chaos Ring was large, there were only so many places they could go on a daily basis. Master's heart was now on the explosives. What was she doing in the Chaos Ring? Xiao Bai's eyes lit up. Perhaps a new door to the stone chamber has been opened. It's been quite some time since the last time. It's time to open it. As soon as he said this, Xiao He and Bai Shi looked at each other with anticipation in their eyes. The three beasts were immediately interested in the direction of the stone room. After searching for a while, sure enough, they saw the figure of Bailey Hongzhuang. Seeing that the three beasts had woken up, a smile appeared on Bailey Hongzhuang's face. Have you rested well? The three beasts nodded repeatedly, but now their focus had shifted to the explosives workshop in front of them. The moment they opened the door to the stone room, they understood why their master had stayed here for so long. Oh my God, this Chaos Ring is just too miraculous. It knows that Master wants to develop explosives, so it created a stone room to teach Master how to make explosives. While White Lion was amazed, it also felt excited. This was extremely important to its current master. Xiao He and Xiao Bai also couldn't help but feel excited. This was definitely another piece of good news, after finding out the whereabouts of their master's parents. The Chaos Ring is indeed a divine weapon. It understands master's thoughts too well. Xiao He smiled. Chapter 1976. Bailey Hongzhuang stayed in the Chaos Ring for 2 days, until she understood a little more. Only then did she go to Nangong Wu's explosives workshop. After all, she only took a few books back to read a few days ago. If there was no news after that, the master's wife would probably feel strange. However, when Bailey Hongzhuang came to Nangong Wu's explosives workshop, she saw Nangong Wu's busy figure. Compared to her usual bright and moving appearance, Nangong Wu was undoubtedly a bit more embarrassed at the moment. Her bright red dress was dyed with a few smears of black. Her hair also revealed a bit of embarrassment. Her bright and dazzling face was a bit more pitch black. Obviously, these were the powder left behind when making explosives. Just from Nangong Wu's constantly busy appearance, it could be seen that in these few days, she had never stopped to rest. Looking at Nangong Wu like this, Bailey Hongzhuang's heart was a bit touched. If it wasn't for her, Nangong Wu wouldn't need to be so busy. Although this was Nangong Wu's hobby, such a high-intensity development was probably very rare. At this moment, in the explosives workshop, in addition to Nangong Wu, there were a few more strangers that Bailey Hongzhuang had never seen before. However, after thinking carefully, Bailey Hongzhuang already knew that these people must have been invited by the master. She only saw Nangong Wu and these people discussing the method of explosives. Sometimes the discussion was very intense. Looking at Nangong Wu like this, Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but have a bit of smile in her eyes. Sure enough, the master's wife had a lively appearance when discussing things. After seeing Bailey Hongzhuang appear, Nangong Wu's face had a smile for a moment. "Hongzhuang, you're here." Nangong Wu quickly walked in front of Bailey Hongzhuang and pulled Bailey Hongzhuang into the pharmacy workshop. "Why didn't you call me when you came?" After the group of people who studied explosives in the explosives workshop saw Nangong Wu's change of expression, their eyes were constantly changing. One had to know that Nangong Wu was extremely fierce when she was arguing with them just a second ago. In an instant, she had turned into an amiable and approachable person. This change was truly too great. "I saw that you were busy, so I didn't disturb you," Bailey Hongzhuang said with a smile. "I'm discussing with them how to make a powerful explosive, but there is no definite result so far." Nangong Wu was a little helpless. Although she was usually very interested in this aspect and made a lot of explosives, she didn't have enough confidence in such a powerful explosive. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled slightly. She also heard the discussion between Nangong Wu and others just now. It was indeed not an easy thing to make such an explosive. The Yu family had a lot of people. If the explosive was not powerful enough, it would not have any impact at all. She didn't have any understanding of explosives before, so she didn't think it was difficult. However, after learning about explosives from the uncle in the Chaos Ring in these 2 days, she understood that all of this was not so easy. However, the content that the uncle said also gave her some hope. Explosives of that level did exist, and explosives even more powerful than that also existed. It was just that this needed to test their ability to make explosives and the materials. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.